can slowly but surely get started. Yeah, wonderful to have you here. You made it through the day of a lot of talks. Great that you still have the mental capacity to listen to yet another one. Well, Niels, I saw that you have doubts. Fair enough. Well, on the one hand, you can listen to what these wonderful people have to say, but I would also very much invite you right from the start to jump in and join into the discussion if you have any questions, if you have any remarks, any opinions that you want to share, experiences. I think it's always nice, even though this is obviously a sort of, frontal setting, that we break up this set of hierarchies, that we are the experts, quote unquote, and you're the audience. I think this is, we could also sit in a circle, essentially, and talk about this topic that is very important to the festival, the main theme of this year, solidarity, and how solidarity can be lived in a festival context, in a filmmaking context, but also by, or how this is limited, how solidarity has its limits in practice, and I'm sure we all have too many stories to tell about this, but perhaps we can also think about ways of how these limitations can be pushed further and break through these glass ceilings that many of us are facing. And I think this is really the point that we want to try and get to today. Not so much talking about the limitations of our work, but how we can maybe think further than that. And for that, we have these wonderful people here. We have Diego Aparicio, who is the founder and director of Queer Waves, the queer film festival in Nicosia and Cyprus. And he's also had a very tough week, not just because his health is affected by the festival mingling, but also because he had to watch a lot of short films. He was part of or he still is part of the international jury. Welcome, Diego. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. And yeah, watching the short films was by no means a hardship to go through. Just saying.
It would have been okay if you had said yes. Then we have Hoda Taheri. Hoda is a filmmaker and artist. She made 3 short films that have taken the short film world by storm, especially the Swiss short film world.
Let's not push it.
She is a celebrity in Locarno. And Hoda has also been part of the selection committee for the international competition this year, so she changed sides in a way. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much. And I think what you said, which was not so easy to watch the short film, we cannot take as a compliment for our selection work, I don't know. Or did you mean differently?
I was saying it was actually a pleasure. Oh, it was not a hardship.
Oh, it's not a hardship. My bad English.
Well, I mean, I think actually this is debatable, no? Maybe we want to put people through a hard time with
that's a good one, yeah.
No, I think it's different takes that we can take with things anyway. Then we have Sarah Dombrink. Sarah is probably what we can call a veteran of film festival work. You've been working in different positions at INTERFILM in Berlin for a long time now. You're acquisition manager for the sales and festival distribution at INTERFILM for a couple of years, and you're also part of the Curatorium, that is the curatorial festival team that you have now that you've changed the structure of INTERFILM a little bit. Surely something that we can talk about in this panel. wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
And last but surely not least, we have Ocean Hale Meißner here. Ocean is living. I mean, Nicosia we can probably also call a capital city. I mean, it is a capital city, but I mean, it's in terms of just sizes of cities, it's still a bigger town than the one that Ocean is living in, because Ocean lives in Dublin. How many of you have been in Dublin before? Nice. So you know what it's like. So Dublin is in the rural area of Saxony, and Ocean is doing a lot of advocacy work, queer and anti-fascist activism. You're involved in youth work, in educational work, in raising awareness, and fighting for a better coexistence in rural Saxony in a way. It's so wonderful to have you here. And because we have such a wonderful panel here, and we're very happy to have all these very different perspectives that we come with, it's also an important matter for us that everyone expresses themselves in the language that they feel most comfortable in. And for Ocean, that's German. So I will try my very best to translate whatever Ocean is saying. And Hoda said she will help me. Exactly. So again, the invitation is open to you. Please jump in at any point when you feel like it. But I would like to start our discussion. Bound by Limits, I think, has a lot to do with expectations. And the expectation of what a festival is supposed to be, what festivals are supposed to do, and maybe Ocean, we can actually start with you, because you technically have nothing to do with festivals. Of course, I forgot to say, Ocean is also part of a jury. This year here in Dresden, you're part of the fully political jury, and that's also where we met actually last year for the first time, when we went on tour with some of these political films around Saxony into the rural areas, and that's where we met. So maybe you can tell us a little bit how, or what your perspective is on what festivals do and what they should do.
Maybe I try in English, and if I have problems you can help out. As queer and anti-fascist activists from rural areas, we often had the feeling that we completely stand alone against this giant wall of this right-going society. And from year to year it's getting harder, because 5 years or 10 years ago we had some organizations who stand behind us, like schools or like organizations and private people. And how more this society goes right, they are getting lesser and lesser. And so that's why we often had the feeling to stand alone. And then film fests like this year give us a little bit of feeling not to be so completely alone. And one big part of it is, does it not only happen in big cities like Dresden? You said that there is a tour, for example, for the fully political category, but also from the Luca tour of the queer films, and who makes stops in, I think, about 10 towns in Saxony, in rural areas, and to see short films from all over the world about political and queer themes gives persons like me a really good feeling. And that's why I'm really thankful that festivals like this year happened.
I mean, I think this is already perhaps one of the first things that we can lock in, is that we often think of a festival as something that happens at one specific time in a year, in one specific place, but actually maybe we have to think about festivals in a different way. Maybe we have to think of festivals as something that transcends a certain time and space, to think about audiences also in a different way. Surely something that we'll get back to in our discussion, but for you, Hoda, as a filmmaker, what are you expecting from a festival to give to you, to your work, but also maybe, how you position yourself in a context in which you're making films?
I think for me, it is very important to separate two categories of festivals, at least. I mean, probably they are more, it's funny to make it two, but for me, in my head, they are two categories. And one category is these huge festivals with a lot of power that I can think, okay, we can criticize constantly and push and try to fight what they are trying to tell us if we can, because also it's very difficult to fight that, because also it can be very dangerous to fight that, also it's not easy to criticize that, so you need to have something on your back to be able to criticize them. On the other hand, you have a smaller festivals, or I don't know, for example, a festival like this, only short film festival, which is not for me a symbol of, like a symbol of power. So then I feel like I need to go much more careful with my expectations, because I know it's also so difficult to run it, it's so difficult to find funding for it, it's so difficult. So I feel I relate to them as much as a filmmaker. I struggle with making not very high budget films. I understand also it's a lot of a struggle to run a festival not with huge budgets and not a very big festival with like all the. So for me it's a bit different in that sense. And the other thing is, then I expect from these smaller festivals, maybe I don't expect, but maybe I think sometimes as a suggestion with myself that maybe it is also because we try somehow to follow the same capitalistic approach as these big festivals, just we're not there. Or for example, I don't know, as a smaller filmmaker, are you trying just to follow the same capitalistic approach as a Hollywood film, just you're not there yet? Or do you try to take a different path? And I think maybe a smaller festival can try to go on different paths. And maybe also we are living at a time that maybe in the smaller cities, for example, we need maybe absolutely a tour to go to smaller cities and show some fully political films, but in big cities and in bigger context of festivals, these festivals in, like for example, Dresden and so on, maybe it's also not a bad approach to do a little bit less, but with more quality. So for example, I don't know, instead of 10 panels, maybe we can have 2 panels, pay people who are on those panels better, and then people who come also as an audience, probably it's easier than to fill a salon. How big is the salon doesn't matter, because it's only 2 panels, so a lot of people can make it to those panels. And then also, because I feel every time it's like more and more, and everywhere you go, it's just getting bigger and bigger and more, and it's becoming a little bit frustrating sometimes, and you feel like, okay, yeah, this is like the 10th festival I'm doing this year, and it's like they become very similar to each other, because all the approach is just like the same capitalistic approach as every other big festivals that we are not maybe super fan of necessarily always. And then maybe, I don't know, maybe this can be for me a thought. I don't know how stupid is what I'm saying, but I just try to say something new. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe because you have a festival.
Yeah. So should I?
Yeah. Go for it.
No, I actually love that you say that, because as a festival, we're always in the predicament of the expectations of the funders, who expect us to grow and show more films, have more audience, have more pens, everything has to be more and grow. And growth is always quantity and not quality. And then as a festival, it's sometimes just running behind that logic, trying to fulfill those expectations. And then it's very important to get the feedback also from the filmmakers, from everyone who's coming to the festival, the regular audience, the filmmakers, who say, you know, we want more quality rather than quantity, in that example that you had right now, because that also, you know, reinforces us, or it gives, is a different level of reflection. Like then we can say, oh, okay, but we really want to do this and that. But then it's also something, you know, we have to stand up to the funders and say, because I think, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before, that the biggest limit for a festival is obviously the money and the expectations, and then we can talk a little bit later about the internal boundaries, maybe also.
I mean, maybe that's actually the perspective that is missing here on this panel, no? This idea that someone from, you know, a ministry would sit here and talk about their expectations of a festival, what they think Filmfest Dresden should do, what they shouldn't do, and be confronted also with some of these realities, because I sometimes feel like there is a gap in this communication of the sort of practical reality of festival work, and exactly hearing all these very different expectations, and then coming together and thinking differently. Well, maybe, you know, there's less and less money, but how can we use that money maybe also more smartly for certain things, and not so much because there's a quota to bring so and so many European films to the festival so that we meet the creative media quota. You know, I mean, these sort of things. But for you, do you sort of like meet similar issues? I mean, your festival is fairly new, and in a way, you know, technically niche in terms of audience, in the public eye anyway. What was your experience of, you know, pitching that idea to begin with, and then arriving at the point where the festival now is pretty well established?
I'll address the question first, and then I'll go on to something else I wanted to touch on, because you've all said some really interesting things that I felt I could go off in those directions. How was the festival pitched at the beginning? Well, part of the reason Queer Wave was pitched to begin with was there was a huge gap in the Cypriot market, if I'm allowed that phrase. I don't think of it as a market anymore, but at the time I was constantly thinking, so as a queer person in Cyprus, where do I go to watch these films? And the answer was nowhere. You couldn't have watched those films, with very few exceptions. For example, like the odd feature, maybe two, that would have been selected for another festival if the programmers deemed it important enough within the year. Or maybe a short film here and there, but that was it. And commercial theaters in Cyprus, which are the predominant sort of form of exhibition, spaces for exhibition of film, they really couldn't care less about art house cinema, independent productions, you know, the films we watch at festivals and we crave for, at least speaking for myself. They are just in it for the business side of things, and whatever gets the most Oscar nominations, you know, they're gonna show. Whatever is English language that they think people can cope with best, they're gonna show. Which dramatically, basically restricts the diversity of films. And I'm not just using this as a buzzword, it's truly like a huge hit on how varied a range of cinema you can watch in cinemas in Cyprus because of this phenomenon. And yeah, basically, I thought, why not give it a go? It was 2020 and the pandemic was in full swing. It was the first lockdown. And I remember having gone to this didn't think, it would have amounted to much, the knowledge that could have been taken away from that. But eventually everything came to a halt. I couldn't work as a freelancer on film productions anymore, which is what I set out to do when I returned to Cyprus. And there I was, basically locked in a house, speaking to some friends about this idea and the possibility of trying an online edition as a proof of concept. And I mean, there was a semi-governmental pot of funding that was reserved for like pilot initiatives by youth. And I was like, okay, sounds appropriate. And yeah, I mean, the first edition of Queer Wave happened over an 8-day period, and it was materialized with under 5,000 euros in total. And I guess the point of the pitch was you can never see these films anywhere else, and why are we completely negating the possibility to like this portion of the population here? I mean, these are just themes to be explored and witnessed, and worlds to be discovered and realities to be shared. And if there is a societal oppression of all of these expressions, it can't be coincidental that you also don't see them in cinema. So why not help that dialogue flourish and like reinforce it positively?
I mean, I know that you said you wanted to go into some of the things that Hoda and Sarah and Ocean had mentioned before, but I would just very briefly would like to know, because you mentioned, Hoda, that there's always bigger. Now the question is, does it help if there's more and more festivals with very specific topics, or would it be not actually better? I don't know. I mean, it's a hypothesis. If these topics, these worlds were to be explored in already existing structures, would find their space there, or is it actually good that there's more, very specifically designated spaces for certain topics, for certain communities, where these films can be shown in your experiences? Maybe also for you in your specific situation.
Okay, so could you repeat the last part of the question, please?
I mean, I think it's just whether it helps specific communities to have their own spaces, and therefore creating, let's say, more festivals that will then, have to, fight against the glass ceiling, fight for funding, and work very often in precarious situations? Or would it help if these topics were explored in already existing structures, and making space for these worlds to exist and find, the place that they need?
Wonderful. So I think this has a geographical specificity to it, because if I think of Cyprus, I can't compare it to France. I can't compare it to Germany. Cyprus is a tiny place by comparison, but also there's less money being invested in culture. Of course, the arts are underfunded, arguably, in a lot of parts of the world. However, as I just said, there are almost no cinemas like exhibiting, even films from Cannes that half of you would probably find too mainstream, for some festivals to showcase. You can't even find those. So I guess the question becomes, is there an appetite for it, and can someone create a space for it? And I think the more you explore things, the more you find out that yes, but also I'm not like romanticizing this idea of like there is an inherent appetite in things. I think you can acquire a taste in things or let yourself be open to more things. And I don't see Queer Wave, for example, as a festival where only the queer community should be coming to screenings or be engaging in discussions. I just find that there is a general lack of, you know, this art and these filmmakers in the general discourse. And again, it's not because people are bigoted and full stop. It's just because festivals are smaller in Cyprus, so they can't showcase 150 features necessarily. They showcase 20. So the queer section is always gonna, you know, also suffer the consequences of that scale in a place like Cyprus. But there is something to be said about like the capitalistic side of things that you touched on before. I think quality should come before quantity, and one of the things I quite like about the smaller scene in Cyprus is that you get to watch gems at every single festival you go. Like, this is something I love, and I hardly ever come out of a screening thinking, oh, you know, that went south, or, you know, it's okay when that happens too, it's an experience. But like, less is more sometimes, and yeah, I don't know if I answered all of your questions, but we can loop and yeah.
Do you want to sort of like add to that idea that certain spaces are really dependent on the geography in which they're taking place, and whether that needs, you know, the particularities of each space require a different setup, where or how you show films, or how you engage communities in a way?
I think it's not only the space. To your ask before, I think we need both. So it's nearly similar to the situation of my political work. It's the same situation with film fests. So we absolutely need little festivals for only political stuff or only queer stuff, to give persons from these communities a safe space and to feel seen. So because I see at big festivals, the world is only looking at the stars and at the famous films and so on, and some really, really important things are not seen. And so I'm really thankful that it gives, that there are festivals like this. But at the other side, we need parts like queer or political stuffs in bigger festivals, that persons who had not contact much time with these categories seen it. So yeah, the first time when I speak for much persons, was the best feeling for me when I know, okay, this is a left bubble or this is a queer bubble, and the most people see things like me. But I think in these times we have to change the society or the thinking in the society, and we can do this when we only have such discussions in the own community. So actually I like to speak or have discussions for people I know they don't see things like me, because after this I often hear that I have changed their mind, and I think this the same at film festivals. So when we have a queer or a political category and people see films of these parts the first time, they had a completely different look, and maybe it changed a little bit of their thinking, and it can help to save our society and a world open mind.
I know I said jump in at any time, and then I have not looked at you for like 15 minutes. So please do jump in at any time. Still, the invitation is still open. But on that point of, you know, holding up dissent and disagreement and being able to hold these spaces and bear them also. How's that for you, Sarah, when you're discussing films in your curatorial team, which is made up of many different people with different views on things, but also thinking about audiences? I mean, I know on the panel before here, people said, you know, they would love for their communities to make films, not thinking about audiences, not caring whether people understand it or not. That's from the filmmaker side, and of course, Hoda, you jump in if you want to. But then there's people who are programming these films, and of course, you know, with everything that is going on, we have very sort of volatile political situations where things can blow up very quickly, very heated discussions, many things can turn black and white very quickly, and people get offended or think that, you know, like showing a certain film is a red flag, and then create a shitstorm out of it. And I'm not judging this at all, I'm just saying what happened in the past, rightly so or wrongly so. So how do you manage that in your decision-making process? Because of course you have a responsibility when programming work, but then very quickly this idea of censorship comes in, and this idea of self-censorship also. How much dissent can you bear, and how much position can you take as a festival for something? If you program a film that is very pro something, and you know there's a lot of people out there who are very much against that, do you still program that film or not?
Okay, there was a lot of questions in that one. Okay, let me unravel, and maybe I'll start from the back, the end.
I mean, answer just whatever you feel like answering. Yeah.
But you also mentioned a lot of, you know, these are obviously thoughts that we also have when we discuss general directions. But maybe I need to take a step back, because obviously, as a festival, as an institution, we're gatekeepers, and we're very aware of that, and we try to be, you know, as open as possible to like all different kinds of feedback we receive, and also factor that into our discussions on what we want to see in our festival. But then we're also not in a very comfortable position that, you know, we also have to apply for funding every year. There's nothing secure about that. It's also a festival that's run mainly on enthusiasm and love for short film, and not money. Like, that's also something I find very important to stress, that also on the institutional side, people earn, or in our case, we earn €13.50 an hour. So that's also important for people to know that we're not in a comfortable, like, oh yeah, like, you know, we lean back and see what we just like to do. But we're very aware that, for example, INTERFILM is a festival of a certain size. It's obviously not one of like the extremely powerful, but we do have a position of power in Berlin, in a city where there's so many festivals for different communities that are extremely important. And maybe it can just sidestep here like a little bit, because before we said it's depending on location, and Berlin is a city that has a vibrant scene of festivals, and that is amazing. And I think we're also part of a network of all the festivals, and it's very important for us to exchange knowledge, whether it be on locations, on people, you know, like Do you have someone who's very good at X, Y, Z, and then, so this is a very important thing to exchange, and I think it's what you also said, it's like, it has to be both, so we have to have these spaces for different communities in the bigger spaces, but then also like specific and not necessarily community enclosed spaces, like you said, but so that are open for everyone, but it don't have to, you know, take care of the people who are not part of the discussion. And so we, so circling back to like the films that we program or the people that we invite to program, and I think that's also another thing that we decide on sort of like things that are topics that are important to us, that we want to see, that we want to bring to our audiences. And it's not so much thinking of an audience as, oh, we need to please them or we need to bring something that will make everyone happy, but rather bringing something that we feel is important at this point in time. Then we go out looking for people who can do that, because most of the time we see that we're not necessarily the ones who can do that, and we invite people from different communities to come and work with us. Yeah, so does that answer? I don't know. I mean, it's not so specific to.
No, of course, but I think we're slowly sort of like getting to the nitty-gritty of doing festival work and programming, because on the one hand you say or you are doing the work, and I'm sure maybe you can also talk about your experience, but you program stuff that you think is important and you ask people to program it. But then do you also feel like to bring in different perspectives requires that you also program things that, or films that disagree or show a different kind of reality or a different truth, to balance that out? Or do you feel like, no, it's actually fine to say this is a position that we think is important right now, and through the films that you show, take a stance in solidarity with whatever topic, with whatever community you're highlighting?
Yes. That was an easy one. I think it's a process. Like, of course, you know, we're also not one person, and as you mentioned before, we had this like one person artistic direction for a long time, and then I think 6 years ago, so with COVID, I always get confused about the years, but I think it was right before COVID that we started it. We founded this like then 10 people collective who it's a lot of work that also goes into like, you know, establishing that structure, but who do the artistic direction together. And so it's obviously not one person, and we disagree a lot, but we also, you know, agree, and then we find a way forward, and then sometimes that we have, that we think, okay, if you want to do that, I think this and that is also important, and then it comes also to like the boiling down the program that we're sometimes just expanding, because a lot of us want to do different things. But yeah, so then, and then we sometimes reach points where we think, okay, this is not going to be something that we can present in all like very weighed. So we just say, okay, but we still want to do that, and it's okay for us to just present one side.
And for you, Hoda, is that something that you personally, or you know from filmmaking colleagues, you know that that there is a fear that maybe touching certain topics, making films in a particular way could be difficult because maybe they're not going to be screened in certain places, or you know, I mean, this whole, or maybe you make a film and then people are upset, and then you're also relying on, like, within the ecosystem of the festival or the film industry, you rely on festival screenings to get funding for a new film, etc.
Yeah, I think because the problem is, and I think this is an unsolvable problem, I don't know, I thought about it and I was like, okay, I have no solution to that, because either you can finance, for example, a film festival or event or whatever by selling tickets and having large audience, so then you need to be very audience friendly, and then maybe you need to make compromises for the artistic and cinematic point of view of your work, so that's one direction. And still is not so, it's very difficult to be commercially successful, that's also one thing we all know. And the other hand is to rely on the funders, which are coming from, usually from the government fundings, and then government has one stand, for example, toward one situation that happens internationally or nationally, whatever, and has another stand toward another, and you cannot go completely against that. And because I have experience of, for example, coming from Iran, it's like, in there is very clear what is the line. So you know, okay, do I want to go beyond this line? Do I don't want to go beyond this line? Do I want to play with the line? So this is, you have three options. But then I came to Germany and I thought, okay, I can say everything. And then it took me a few years that I understand, oh, okay, not maybe everything. So, and then I don't know what should a festival do in this, because if I am running a festival, I always try to, if I want to suggest someone something, it's good to put myself first in the shoes of like a festival director, for example. And then if I have a funding organization which tells me, okay, this and this is a red line, you cannot say this and that, or you cannot show this and that. And then I have, on the other hand, filmmakers who are burning to talk about that topic and find that topic very important. Maybe I personally also find the topic very important. What do I do? Do I lose the funding and the whole system that I built, within which I can still maybe create minor changes, or still keep a room open for maybe one day, with the hope that one day this topic become more chill and become discussable? Or do I go like a very strict and say, yeah, no, I would. So it's a very difficult, I don't know what should a film festival, how a film festival should position themselves. Because we recently also experienced that. And then, yeah, and I think in Germany it was very difficult towards certain topics to mention. I'm good at talking about things without talking about them. But then also I was I had not at all a judgmental feeling toward the festivals who could not talk about that topics, because I, as also artist, could not talk about those, and I could understand the fear of them, and I had also the same fear. So yeah, I'm not having an answer to that problem, because we cannot get rid of the funders, because there's not enough ticket to sell, and we cannot just rely on the commercial, because we're not commercial. So what to do? I don't know. Do you have a solution?
Anyone?
You have a solution? Or anyone?
Yes.
I have experience to share. Well, I come from Mexico, and as everyone knows, everyone talks about cartels, drugs, women get killed in the north of Mexico, from the north of Mexico. And I shoot a short film with a Mexican director in Berlin last year about the girl found dead in a river in Berlin, and actually she's Mexican. And she was trying to put the project inside of different festivals in Berlin, and they didn't want to show that reality, that also women get killed here in Berlin, or in Germany. So yeah, we are trying to put the project in different festivals, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard because they don't want to show that reality also here in Europe, but they show us as Mexican being, like the typical country that is really dangerous.
I would say that's a little bit of a different problem, because that is a problem that I expect a festival to change their point of view, because I don't think any funder would cut their fundings if they show a film about a certain problem like that. It's difficult for them. How do they want to locate it? What do they want to call it? It's a very bureaucratic country. So that, I think, a problem one can address and expect them to change their point of view. But they are topics which are much more hardline, and festivals have difficulty to go. And if they did went a lot of festivals who I heard from, for example, in the last years, that they a little bit were not so positioned in the way that the government was trying to tell us what's the narrative. They got, in a way, into trouble, into problem, into complication, and so on and so on, which I think is slightly different, but I don't know. Of course, I'm not an expert, so I'm just a filmmaker.
So, in the interest of like maybe ripping a band-aid off, let's talk about things by talking about things. So, yes, for example, okay, let's just drop the word and then it becomes easier. Palestine, yeah? I mean, I feel like specifically in the context of Germany, I have, at least in the past, I've never lived in Germany, but I've visited a festival in Germany during times of like big discussions about Palestine, without mentioning the name Palestine. Which is absurd and a paradox, but I think we are expected to be good, and like we are expected to play by certain rules, some of which are unspoken, some of which are spoken and absurd, and they all go back to censorship, because you asked what is a festival expected to do. We have expectations of what festivals should do. I don't know if I would ask that question. My question is, what can a festival do? Let's start from there. And I think a festival showcasing art, film is an art form, as well as other things. Like film has been used as a propaganda tool, but ultimately what I want to see festivals doing and what they can do is unlock perspectives, unlock possibilities. And I think, I mean, it all ties in somehow for me when I think of queer wave and what it tries to do. Queerness is not just about like discussing LGBT plus topics, but it's about bringing topics, making topics possible and discussable. And like, why shouldn't we speculate, was a word I heard in the previous panel. Why shouldn't we speculate about a future where certain things, you know, aren't impossible, aren't ridiculous? We don't live under as oppressive a regime as, you know, we sometimes find ourselves to be in the present. And like, there's layers of that. There's many layers of that. Before I ask what a festival can do, I would always start from who are the people behind the festival? Because we are all people, and I don't think I want to think of structures such as festivals or bigger institutions perhaps as like soulless machines. They're not. They're showcasing art made by people, and I think the people behind a festival hope that they'll communicate something or another through what they're sharing, because it is a practice of sharing, and curation is a practice of caring also. What you decide to share carries meaning and consequence if you care to look for it, define it, shape it, sculpt it. And I think that's very powerful, and there's a lot of potential in it. And I think people into queer theory like to think of potentiality. You know, it's like the ability to have potential. Like it's a future-looking thing, because it's not there yet, but it could become that in the future. And I'll stop there until we circle back to here.
Maybe I can add to like also what you said about festivals, and I think what in these times that are really challenging, I mean, it sometimes feels ridiculous to be talking about what you can't talk about, while in the rest, I mean, this is not an actual, like, this shouldn't actually be the problem. Like, we're not talking about the actual problem then, and about people dying. So then, you know, what is important is to create a space where a lot is possible without deconstructing yourself, because I think it's also a important to still exist, to be that space, because if you blow yourself up, then it's, you know, then the space is gone, and then what's left, like we always have to think about, like, what, if we do that, then what's left? Like, who's gonna be the people who run things then? Who are the festivals who are still there after that? And so I think, yeah, we try to like carefully navigate how we can, yeah, be there. And I think what's also important is that we're an open space where people come and where, you know, this is then it's a different conversation. It's a conversation at our office. We sit at the desk, we have some food, we have some coffee, and we talk openly, and we talk about what is possible within these boundaries. And then we're back at boundaries.
But how? I mean, I think there's two things that are quite interesting that you mentioned. This idea that festivals are, you know, made of people and made by people, but who is representing these festivals, and are festivals really representing everyone who's working there? I think that is something. There's a big divide or a gap between what is happening internally and what is happening externally, what is communicated externally, and the position that a festival is taking on that becomes official, and discussions that are happening internally. And how do you sort of, and maybe this is also something that is important for your work in the organizations and initiatives and alliances that you work in. How do you negotiate exactly these boundaries that you feel are there? Maybe they're not there. And how do you make sure that the people that you discuss them with are not compromised, remain safe, and then yet you're trying to push these boundaries away? So it's like this strange thing where there is something that you can't really grasp, that seems unreal, but yet is really daunting, and is completely justifying some kind of fear. And then you're discussing something internally together with the people that you work with, and then you go out, and are you able to say what you discussed, or do you have to arrive at another point to, you know, make the funders happy, or not create some sort of like online shitstorm, but also again to keep the people that you work with safe in the end of the day? Whoever wants to jump in. I saw you had.
Yeah, I found myself wanting to respond as soon as you said keep the funders happy. No, like it's these initiatives that give value to them and their money. It's not the other way around. Like, we're not there to make the funders happy. They can, if they wish, like, you know, give us less next year or whatever. But that's not why you start a festival. And actually, that's also key in another point of the discussion, which is to say what you're expected or not say something because you think you're expected not to say it. That's fully going into people-pleasing mode. And pleasing your funders or pleasing your audience or whatever, that's never gonna advance the conversation. Because pleasing means giving someone something that they feel comfortable receiving. And it shouldn't be about that. And that's a big discussion on its own. But yeah, just wanted to jump in on that point.
I feel like something is brewing in you.
I think it's a little bit different where these boundaries are because of spaces. Because I absolutely feel what you say, and yeah, we don't have to make the boundaries happy and feel good, but in rural areas, it's not only okay you get the money to make a film fest or not to make a film fest. It's the persons who give us money in rural areas. There are not 10 places as a safe space for queer or leftist communities. There's only one space, and if you said something wrong, then they cut their finances, and then you had no place. So when I spoke in bigger cities like Berlin or Leipzig or Dresden, I absolutely can say other things than when I talk in rural areas. That's not why I won't say the things I think there, but if I do and shoot, for example, against parties like CDU or FDP, I absolutely love to do this in bigger cities, but if I do it in my home, then we had no chance to get to do anything. So this I absolutely feel you, and I think there's a difference between bigger cities and smaller cities, and between from country to country. In some places you can make the difference. Okay, will I say something or will I not? In some places you have to think about it before you speak.
May I ask a question, because I'm very interested to know how is it with the taste of people in films? Like, for example, these tours that comes to these smaller cities, what kind of a film? Because I think, do you feel there is a difference between the taste of people that they go to these screenings in smaller cities than in bigger cities, in terms of films, in terms of artistic language, or in terms of topics?
You mean what kind of people going there?
Yeah, the people who going there, what kind of a taste they have mostly? Like, is it a difference between the taste of people, for example, who come to the Dresden Filmfest and watch films?
I think there is a difference because in Dresden maybe you have 10 cinemas, or you have much places where you can show such films. And in rural areas, in Döbeln, my hometown, for example, we have one cinema, but they never will show films like this. So the festival have to go to social and youth working centers to show the films there, and it's really cool for people who want to see. But if you go as a person, I think there will absolutely be persons who not have so much to do with it normally, and they would like to see it, but they can't go there because if they go as a normal person in a place like this, there's you go to this place, then you have to be a queer person or you're a leftist. So they cannot say, okay, today I go to this place, I look these films, and maybe it's changed my mind or it's interesting for me, and then I go and everything is okay. Because the people are always looking who is going there, and so always the persons who are coming there are persons from our community. That's the problem. So we need normally. What we need is to show such films in marketplaces, like in Dresden, Theaterplatz.
In the open air here.
Genau, like the film open air, where can people not say, okay, I have to go there for the film, because they say, okay, I will walk to the city and maybe I have a little. That's the different how we work, and I make. Was ist eine Wanderausstellung in English?
Like a traveling exhibition.
Yeah, I'm a part of a traveling exhibition about queer life in rural areas in Saxony. And if we put them in these places like social youth working centers, nobody will see it outside from our communities. And so we don't put big rainbow flags on it, so it looks really like a normal banner. But if you we put it in the Schaufenster?
Like shop windows.
Yeah, in shop windows in inner cities, in really small towns in Saxony, And when people walk with their dogs and going in the evening when not so much is in the streets, and they're going and see and look at it and say, okay, that's interesting. And the feedback that we get is that really much persons seen this traveling exhibition because it's in shop windows in the inner city. So if we put it in like social centers, the persons never will see it. And I think it's the same how we need to work with films like this, to give them the chance to see without getting labeled for C.
And there is no possibility for this, like cinema, the bigger cinema there to show this kind of films. There is no possibility to collaborate with them because
it's really unrealistic. So at the beginning of the year, I do a spot with Amnesty International, who was made for cinemas all over Germany before not this year, for the votings, before the votings, and it should be shown in all areas of Germany. But the feedback we get, so much cinemas say, okay, we send it, but only in big cities. And they also ask cinemas in rural areas, okay, would you show the spot? It's not extremely anti-fascistic, it's not extremely queer, it's only for a world open society. And the places say, no, we won't show this because they had the fear that after this lesser persons come to the cinema to see, because they say, okay, you're a supporter of this community, so we don't want to give you our money.
So you think also even if they show it, probably not so many people go to watch it because they would find it not aligned.
They have the fear.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's right, if it's for real, but and fear is a big thing for people in rural areas.
I mean, I feel like that's sort of like the underlying thing that we're talking about all the time, like since the beginning. It's fear, and this idea of limits and limitations and boundaries is the fear, no?
So a couple of seemingly unrelated things pop into my head while we're having these discussions, and like one of them is audience development. You know, big buzzword. Like people think of audience development as like, oh, you know, you are educating people or basically showing them possibilities of what else they might like that they don't know they like yet. And I you know, if you abstract that a little bit, it's almost like, okay, why shouldn't commercial theaters show queer and like anti-fascist films, for example? Or, you know, why shouldn't commercial theaters have art house films in Cyprus every now and again? You know, it's like these assumptions based on what we think, whatever. But it's playing it safe, and if we let go of the practicality of playing it safe for a second, I'm not saying we should do like risky things to, you know, the integrity of people we work with or the communities we engage with, if we're talking like serious hate crimes, for example. But yes, I mean, limits, boundaries, we push them. Like, we should push them. Otherwise, you know, these whole like waves of conservative politics, you know, reigning all over the world, it's like, well, they're pushing the limits inwards. So if there's nothing opposing that inwards tendency, then, you know, you shrink. And, you know, those are your freedoms and those are your, like, I don't know, possibilities of things you can explore and the scope of discussions you can have and the bodily autonomy you can have and enjoy in life. And is that really the direction we want to be going towards? Anyway, yeah.
I mean, I think that's super interesting, because also while you were talking and describing how you do this exhibition, for example, this idea that we have to start thinking outside the structures that we're in, and how we've always done things, and these are the ways that we know things are working for us, more or less, and we, sometimes we push a little bit and we go a bit further, and then someone, gives us a little slap on the head because they said, oh, no, that was a bit too far. We're going to give you a little bit more money, but go back to your, room. And maybe we have to start thinking outside of these structures a little bit, and try to think, how can we make sure that, and of course we're sort of like entering a space of utopia in a way, but this is exactly perhaps the space that we need to be in if we want to push these limits, these boundaries, our fears, our uncertainties, to think, well, how can we fund festivals differently if politics are becoming more and more reactionary? How can we support the filmmakers who are making work? Whose work do we want to show? Where are these exhibition spaces? Do we go out and also change our idea of what cinema is, of what a cinematic experience is in a way?
Can I just quickly jump in?
Yeah, of course.
I'm still trying to catch up, Ocean, with I think it's incredibly brave and really, really fucking smart what you have done with this challenge. And I know that the things that you both have said, yeah, but why not cinema, or don't shrink, what you've done is actually, you've gone beyond that. You've taken it to the town, and you've done it in this very, very subtle, very stealthy way, where you have already thought, it's such a big vision that you have, that you're thinking of the dude walking his sausage dog in the middle of the night, who's daring to take a pic. That's the history of that's queering history. That's a long line of solidarity of people who have had to be stealthy, and it's cinema is a niche experience. It's a very privileged experience, and what you're doing is you're taking it to the town. I just want to bow down and say how incredible that is, and I would be curious to know how did you come to that idea? What was the process? Was that something that immediately came to you, or you just thought fuck, how am I going to do it?
It was not my idea. It was the idea of some queer working places from Saxony, but they are all in big cities, in Chemnitz, Leipzig and Dresden, and they find that the queer life in rural areas in Saxony isn't seen, and it's right. And the problem was they are looking for persons who told their stories about how it is to grow up as a queer person in these areas, and the most persons won't talk about it. And so they come to me and say, okay, you are one of these persons who have no problems to talk about your history, and want you be a part of our traveling exhibition? And say, absolutely yes. And so it started, and I seen this, maybe it's the same when 4 years ago, I made the first Christopher Street Day in my town. And before I was going to the city and going into shops and said, okay, can I put some flyer here? Or would you support us at the day of the CSD and you put a little rainbow flag in your shop window? Is it okay for you? And the persons are not like this, how you expect it. They say, oh no, we don't like this. They say, it should be normal in 2022. We stand behind you and we like what you do. But we have fear if I put a little rainbow flag in my shop window, they break it down. So we like you and thank you what you do, but we can't support you because we had a fear that I mean, I live in a region where 40, 50, 60% of people are voting for AfD. And other parties like NPD and Freie Sachsen, Free Saxons and such things, they are this. I understand them, and I personally know persons who have own organizations. They have to close because they show their opinion of politics, and the persons say, no, we don't want to have you here. And so it's not that I say, all the persons who won't support us are idiots. I understand why they don't do it.
There is really scary hate crime. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure if you're really fully aware of that, but like actually life-threatening hate crime.
And I think that the most problem of hate crime, also the reasons for hate crime are often not that persons don't like things. The problem is that persons don't understand things. And so what I mean, we don't need to show films like this, like the tours and places. What we need is to change the society. We need, was ist verpflichtend? An obligatory program for in schools, that the next generation understands themes like queer life. But there's the problem, we are too late for this, because the queer youth work in my area is cancelled because of financial problems.
Also in Berlin.
Yeah, in the most areas in Leipzig, Chemnitz, Dresden, it's going on, but in the rural areas of Saxony, the completely queer work is cancelled. And so the next generation won't get some part to this queer community because of films or such things. And so this hate crime from the older generations coming to them. And this is what I mean, hate crime comes not from we hate it, but we don't understand it.
I think that sort of like goes again along those lines of perhaps we need to rethink what festivals can do, in the sense that it's sort of like an elitist thing that people from cities go to, or a certain class, educated class, middle class, upper middle class, go to because their parents used to go, whatever, and that's sort of like how you grow up with these contents, these artistic forms, etc. Is that something that in your work, but also for you, Hoda, as a filmmaker, is that something that you think about? How can we screen the films that we project in festivals? How I as a filmmaker can, maybe also go to other places, try and find different spaces, and engage. You use that audience development buzzword, but how can we find audiences in a way beyond the spaces that have historically always been sort of like reserved for certain groups of people?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question, because at the moment I'm dealing a lot with that question. Even I'm thinking, okay, for sometimes, like recently I was on some speed dating event, and then there was a lady who told me, why you don't make mini-series, why do you want to make a film? And I was like, that's actually smart. Why do I? Because I think we learned a certain way of, and as you said in the previous panel, it's very rusty structures that the festivals have. So for example, I don't know, as you said, what you did is very brave in putting, and very intelligent to how you can use a different way of showing films. I think in that terms, also festivals are very rusty structures, but as a filmmaker to start, it's quite difficult to start anywhere else than the rusty structures of the film festivals, because otherwise it's like, how do you get to anything to start? But I think the more I go forward, the more I feel for a different form, that also more audience friendly. Because for example, I have a feeling sometimes even I come across that, okay, is these things, even not, sometimes I feel even it's beyond educated people, for educated people, it's even for specifically industry goers to festivals that they go to from one screening to another and they say, oh, this was very interesting, but because of a very specific understanding of cinema, which even like maybe my engineer friend who is very educated is like looking at it like, what are you like? You really can watch all the, like this block from beginning to the end and doesn't get anything of it. So yeah, in that sense, it's a very difficult, and that to hit that sweet spot where you can express yourself artistically, but on the other hand, have an audience and be more approachable or accessible for a larger audience. I think is always like some struggle that I'm trying to figure out what to do with, but
maybe it's also not the responsibility of the filmmaker in the end of the day. Maybe this is too much responsibility.
It is
on your
becoming,
shoulders.
because it is you spend CO2 so you're spending a lot of resources, you're spending also your energy, you're doing a work which is often not paid and so on. So it's good to put it in a way, in a more senseful direction, because sometimes I also feel like, do I make any sense with what I'm doing in my life? I'm 33, it's like, it's really, like, I feel like, sometimes it is, I don't know. What do you think?
I just wanted to make a big disclaimer, which is super important, and acknowledge that, yes, I absolutely understand the gravity of hate crimes, and especially life-threatening ones, which is why I said earlier on, and I didn't mean for it to be underplayed in the whole other stuff that was mentioned, you can try and push the boundaries, and as much as you feel safe to do so. Like I mentioned before, if it's putting people at risk, maybe it's not worth it, and you're the one to make that call always. And it's absolutely different because we tend to think of, the urban centers and what the trends are there and whatever, and elitist practices or less accessible practices, let's say, like cinema going and people engaging there. We're only discussing that angle more, I feel, because of the panel we're on and the context we're in. But there are absolutely many different ways of pushing the boundaries. You can push them gently. You don't have to go from 1 to 100 overnight. It can be from 1 to 1.5 or 2 or whatever feels safe. But if we're talking about being bound by limits, for me it is important to question why those limits are there, who put them, who are they really serving, and it's never the responsibility of one person alone. It's never within the scope of the ability of one festival alone. And I think someone said something interesting to me during this festival, which was, this concept of solidarity doesn't really remove the problem at the end of the day. We can all gather in the same room and agree, that abortion rights are important to all of us and we'll fight for them vocally and so on. But the real problem comes back to what Ocean said, which is that there are voices, other voices, opposing, this one in this room, the collective one, I mean. So that's the bigger problem. It's always the fact that, you can stand in solidarity with people you more or less agree with or can be persuaded to agree with or see eye to eye with. But what about the rest of the people out there? What about the AfD in Germany, I mean, and all the other right-wing parties gaining seats in parliament in other countries. Cyprus is no exception, I mean, and if anything, I think the discussions being had on those fronts are all constantly saying that, you know, more left-leaning parties are losing some of their radicality, and they find themselves a little bit segmented, whereas, you know, of course, there are differing opinions in the left. It's not one unified thing. But yeah, fascism is there, and it's a constant thread, and it's a recurring thread. And if we're constantly thinking, oh, this is the safe tactic to play, and constantly losing ground, then maybe a safe tactic is not really what matters. It's not as simple as that, of course, never at the end of the day, but yeah, there needs to be like a soul behind what is happening, and I don't have the answers, but I can just throw in some thoughts here and there.
No, I mean, thank you for doing that. I mean, you've been doing that for the past 1 hour and whatever it is. Are there any more questions, remarks from your side? Yes.
Question from the one who's running the festival. Why, we had an experience by using online screening through the code, and it was, I think, it was a very privileged moment, since that, for example, a selection from Berlinale could be reachable from all around the world, not just the community that has access to the Berlinale. So why we push that back again? Because nowadays I think the rising of the far right was a result of rising of content creators over the online streaming platforms during the COVID. Everyone started to talk about different things during the COVID. The intellectuals, the leftists, left that environment and gave it to them by not creating proper content on that platform. So why we just hesitate to stream festivals program online to be accessible from all around the world, even from the rural communities, they are, I can completely understand, I come from Iran, so I completely understand that they hesitate to go there to get labeled somehow, but they can watch the films through their computers.
So you're asking why we're not putting the festival programs online? I think that's I'm sorry to say, it's a very banal and very simple thing, is that it's a lot of work and there's a lot of money involved, like you have to pay the films. But then you have platforms like Talking Short, and they do different, like there's platforms that have short films online and different programs, or invite festivals to show a program online. So it's just a very different type of work. And during the pandemic, we didn't have the physical festivals. Speaking from our experience, we had one festival where it's where we had both, and that nearly made us go crazy. What I think maybe is also important is also the wish that I read from your question is that you have more contact with different perspectives, and that's the idea with festivals generally, that we try to put different perspectives out there. And by the way, Palestine itself is not a scary word in Germany. I'm also going to have Palestinian perspectives at our festival, for example, but also, as well as many others. So, it's all going to be. It's all you try to open the flower bouquet as a festival that has a big international outlook and have different perspectives for different people. And when we talked about in the beginning that we have like specific spaces for different communities, it's also something to put them in programs where people get in touch with it. But it's at the end also a very festival-like experience, and it's a very privileged situation and also a very educated and different audience than what you have online. And yeah, so I understand what the wish. From a practical standpoint, I don't know how to solve it, but I know that there's also very great online resources for short films that are freely accessible on YouTube and whatnot, that are just not curated, but yeah.
I mean, there's also the whole hierarchy of how the film industry works.
Yes, yeah, that's what I mean. You have to pay them. Yeah. Okay, so then.
But also just like the course that a short film has to run to be able to keep going and financing other work, and it goes through the festival circuit.
Yeah,
that's important.
yeah, I think yeah.
But I think that's maybe not known for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So, for example, if the sorry. Yeah, please.
Yeah. You know, when COVID started, lots of festivals get cancelled. We all know the history. So, but after that, after 6 months, platforms have started to develop some DRM, some location-tracked streaming. So I think, with respect, I think this is the festival decision to put it away, not the technical, because there is technical possibilities. And one more thing is that, you know, yes, we know staff is short of 2 weeks on the list, so you can find whatever you want, but the curation is matter. You know, how you present artwork is matter, and the discussion around it is also matter. So, from an audience perspective, I would really love to watch, for example, INTERFILM's film from their curational perspective at the time that everything is happening, and talk about it on social media. You know, so to create a audience structural things also on social media, because I think this is a way that right parties and, you know, people with that method of thinking, they are super good at it. How to use technology to promote their ideas, but I think we are not good. Yeah.
I want to add something or comment on it, because we have, I'm from the Leipzig, so we have like 6 films during the festival week. You can watch this for 24 hours. The problem is the rights you mentioned, but the other thing is that you have to advertise this, and nobody knows about it, because we have just a short budget on advertisement, and we cannot make like the social media campaign about this specific, because it can split the funding too, because we are not paid to do this. We are paid on creating an event that is local. On first hand, we are an event, so that's not our like core work we do, and we have this program, but when we don't have the advertisement, nobody asks for it and nobody watches it. So our views on the program are so low that we cannot make it like bigger or share with the world to see. So we are an event, and I think that's the core of it. And the other thing is that we don't have funding for it, so we have funding for specific things we have to program, but not for having like in streaming platform in some kind of sort.
But also say that I do really like the thought that you had, that, you know, this having all these programs online curated and a discussion around it, that this sort of could be a means to connect people across the world, and like to help in forming bonds and solidarity between different people and communities.
Oh, I just got a good idea. like a pirate film festival that's offshore. Do you know what I mean? Like that's offshore that nobody can track, it has to keep moving, whatever, and just like pumps like awesome, radical short films into the ether. Whoever wants to hang around afterwards.
I mean, I think now, you know, now that Miriam. I mean, Ocean also wants to say something. Unfortunately, we're slowly running out of time now that the discussion gets heated. Of course, I feel super bad now that, you know, we talked about unimportant stuff for an hour and 20 minutes, and now we get to the real thing, and I say that it's over. No, but maybe I briefly give priority to you, and then Miriam, please do say what you have to say.
I not really can see you, but I want to say something. I absolutely understand your point, but to be honest, how much persons who vote for parties like AfD would view political or queer short films in the internet, when they also can look videos by RTL 2 or streamings from far-right YouTubers. So I think they don't want, and yes, now you can say, okay, when they don't want to look at the internet, why should they go to a film festival like this here and look it there? Because humans always want to be something interesting. And it's different if I spend my free time to look queer videos on the internet, or if I put some cool dresses on and say, okay, this weekend I go to International Film Festival and look some national or international competition, and maybe I see 1 or 2 queer films. So I think that's the difference. Yeah, we need more films of these categories in the internet, but how many of these people would look it, view it, watch it was the word. How many of them will watch it? So I think we need to get them outside their houses in the festivals, and then they have to see it.
Miriam.
Yeah, it's actually funny because Ocean said it all. Julie, I was also going to jump into that. An interesting point might be the limit of the art form that we're talking about, the limit of film, because the way the online sphere works is populism works fantastic there. But as soon as you want to have like an expanded discourse or go into the depth of it, it's not made for this. And yeah, I think that's where we're reaching the limit of trying to translate what we love to create in person into an online sphere.
Anna, come on, do it.
Well, that's what, because you know what we can push the limit of time and the time we spend also to programming. And I felt like when you were saying you created buzz in the marketplace, for instance, you can use festival stuff and say, hey, let's just make, I don't know, let's use our time as a group, come together, go to do this. Because I grew up in a place like this, and when something happens in the marketplace and there's a buzz of people you don't know, they get curious. And they come out because they want to see what's going on. Oftentimes, different places, different people, but yeah, different times, I guess. 15 years ago it worked. I was just thinking, because also what you said, when you want to challenge quality, that's or rather than quantity, because we do have this decision of how we use the time. Because we just have limited of time, but we can use it smartly or wisely to change that kind of capitalist narrative.
There would be a lot more to talk about, but not in this formation.
But we are here to Sunday, I think. So maybe come.
No, exactly. So we have to stop this sort of official part now, unfortunately. But I want to thank you, the 4 of you, for sharing your thoughts, your insights,
your experiences. Thank you for speaking English. That was amazing. I am very relieved for many reasons, and I think you've done really well. Thank you for listening, for participating. I think there's a lot of food for thought. I know that's such a boring thing to say, but it's really true. I think we're at a point in history, not to make this bigger than it is, but I think we're in a point in history where we really need to start thinking differently about what we do and how we do it. And of course, we don't have the answers, but I think that listening to you, seeing that you're interested in that kind of stuff, creates a sense of utopia is not completely impossible, and I think that creates an energy to keep going and to keep thinking and to keep discussing and to keep this process flowing. And I think that is the least that we can do. So thank you very much for this process. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the Filmfest, and we'll be around.
Darf ich euch das einfach sagen? Dort eine Toilette. Ja.